This is essentially a practical guide meant for everyday use, if you want to know what to do if masters and clairvoyants start sending destructive energy into your personality and other parts of your being. As you may have guessed, there is very often no easy way out, but with this guide you stand a much better chance. But let's first spend a handful of minutes on the bigger picture, because humanity currently almost doesn't know anything about the true face of spirituality and religion. This also holds water if you, due to a religious belief, have studied so-called holy scriptures for a lifetime. And it is true if you have studied religions for years as a scientist. Clairvoyants and spiritual masters are always evil to ordinary human beings, animals and similar types of defenseless life forms in the universe. All clairvoyants in the universe are stratospherically intelligent, and every single one of them knows more about medicine, mathematics, physics, engineering, history and numerous other things than all scientists on Earth combined. All physically healthy clairvoyant individuals on Mother Earth can speak any language, although some biological rigidity can sometimes hinder them a little bit. All spiritual masters are astronomically intelligent and can speak any language in the universe effortlessly and fluently. The intelligence of ordinary human beings is almost non-existent compared to the before-mentioned two groups. Clairvoyants and spiritual masters use their mental superiority in an evil fashion in order to selfishly enrich themselves. All clairvoyants and spiritual masters can from extreme distances with extreme precision see all your psychological and biological weaknesses. And they can easily see your account balance in the bank. And your shoe size. And your social security number. They can see exactly how many cells that you have in your body in this very moment. They can see if you participated in the 9/11 attacks in 2001 and what your motives eventually were. They can tell with 100% accuracy who was behind the murder of John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1963. They can tell the exact nuclear codes or procedures that would come into play if the Russian or American president decided to launch a nuclear war in this very moment. But no enlightened master or clairvoyant is all-knowing, because such a living being does not exist. It is in particular difficult for them to tell what is going to happen in the future. No, not when we are talking about the bigger picture, because they are the very designers of the bigger picture. But when we are talking about smaller trivial details that they, by the way, don't care about anyway. One example could be to determine if some randomly selected Janet or Joe 100 incarnations from now would develop a tendency to eat a special ice cream every Tuesday for 2 years. No enlightened master or clairvoyant would be able to answer such a question. Humanity belongs to a special and very unfortunate group of individuals that is deliberately spread all over the universe so that it is hard for them to communicate with each other. That way a genius idea will very rarely spread from one location to the next. Some or all of the individuals in this group live in solar systems, and all of these places function as concentration camps, and all of these places, including the life forms in them, have literally been constructed by spiritual masters in order to function as brutal factories that produce new masters. Humanity belongs to a group consisting of the most helpless, unintelligent and the most victimized living beings anywhere. Ordinary human beings and their fellow inmates are the laughingstock of the clairvoyants and enlightened masters. Clairvoyants are to some extent biologically vulnerable though, so they may not be laughing as much as the enlightened masters, but clairvoyants are always siding with the masters, and absolutely none of them can be trusted. Diseases, wars, famines, handicaps, death, hurricanes, earthquakes and other hair-curling things are not only spectator sports from the perspective of enlightened masters. No, these disasters play a vital role in the evil production process and are being perceived as wonderful and enchanting energy interactions by these affected, pretentious and self-serving wrongdoers. And, by the way, did you know that the enlightened masters do not at all live in an environment that is without time and space? They are on the contrary very conscious about where they are situated in the three-dimensional space, and they are very conscious about the past, the present and the future. The universe is both the home and the criminal operational base of the spiritual masters, and there are billions of them, but not endless amounts of them. Enlightened masters tend to spend most of their day at high energy levels, different places in the universe without a biological body. They can materialize one out of thin air, if needed. They actually constitute a gigantic group sex community, and the more masters there are around, the better sex they have. They love to gather and form huge clouds of energy where they melt together at the atomic level, and that way experience gargantuan cosmic orgasms. This is one of the reasons why the Bible talks about heaven. And most people have also heard about the concepts of nirvana and samadhi. And the kundalini energy. Spiritual masters are actually always having an orgasm, also when they are alone. But before you start venturing into reading hundreds of pages of traditional religious texts or start ingesting New Age books like burgers and popcorn, which many of you unfortunately already have done, please understand that all religions have been carefully crafted so that you will never get to a point where you will be able to understand the bigger picture. Any religious terminology that has ever been handed humanity on a silver platter by clairvoyants and spiritual masters has only been put in place in order to facilitate the cruelty that the clairvoyants and spiritual masters have planned to expose humanity to. The amount of pain in the world goes up every time a new genuine religion is being created. All genuine religions function as the last step in the production of new enlightened masters, although only a small percentage of the devoted followers will ever reach that point, and the selection process is always being shrouded in secrecy. All new masters could have easily been constructed without utilizing evilness. But when a group of individuals in the universe becomes too powerful, then it's inevitable that they start seriously considering misusing the situation, because it's a law of nature. And that's exactly the reason why the production of new spiritual masters takes place in an irresponsible, arrogant, murderous and infantile fashion. As the Bible says, you must become like children again. The primary targets of clairvoyants and masters are always the weakest of the weakest, because it requires a minimum amount of work. Why walk 5 miles, if you can get away with only walking 1? This is also why a poor nation like India is literally wall-to-wall saturated with religious activities, and it is for the same reason the New Age movement is targeting people with health issues and psychological problems. This is also why homosexuals, for example, are being attacked by different religions like Islam and Christianity. The spiritual masters essentially own the universe. All advanced living beings in the universe follow what novelist and psychic Thomas Gurner Larsen calls the "what's in it for me" principle. By the way, this principle is also a natural part of human life, whether you have noticed it or not. With extreme superiority like the one that the enlightened masters own comes laziness and the irresistible temptation to try to enrich oneself by taking the path of least resistance. All advanced living beings are having a cost-benefit analysis in the back of their mind, and if it undeniably and overwhelmingly pays off to brutally exploit someone, more often than not it is going to materialize. There is no such thing as an incorruptible soul. It doesn't exist anywhere. The most successful individuals of the universe also happen to be the worst criminals anywhere to be found, which explains why praying to your favorite god will rarely lift your family and your country out of poverty and despair. New Age influencers sometimes teach people about angels and their completely unselfish, loving and incorruptible personality. But as already mentioned, such beings have never existed. No one in the entire universe has a guardian angel. If you belong to the group of the worst criminals in the universe, spicing things up with half-truths and complete fabrications just adds to the fun. We are now going to directly address the main subject of this presentation: how to defend yourself against the brutality of clairvoyants and spiritual masters. As mentioned earlier, all genuine religions are about subjecting their victims, who all live in concentration camps different places in the universe, to the last doses of evilness so that they will become enlightened masters that somewhere in the future voluntarily will participate in the construction of more concentration camps. In the last production stage, masters and/or clairvoyants send destructive energy into their victim, typically from a distance. Maybe you have heard about the concept distant healing, which is obviously just crime from a distance. It is basically a question about permanently lifting the victim's energy level to a much higher state. You see, one of the main differences between ordinary human beings, clairvoyants and masters is their average energy level. You could also choose to say that there is a remarkable difference between the psychological strength that they have in their possession. Any enlightened master can make his or her biological body evaporate at will. Ordinary human beings cannot do this because they are incredibly psychologically weak. The before-mentioned transformation process may take weeks, months, years or decades. The primary target inside of you are your feelings, because it requires only a minimum amount of work to almost destroy you as a person. When your personality almost permanently collapses, it makes your entire energy system much easier to alter, form and shape. The victim often suffers from extreme and permanent levels of fear throughout the transformation process that is said might take years. The amount of discomfort is always sought to be situated at levels where the victim will not end up successfully committing suicide, though. There might obviously be some suicide attempts along the way, but as long as the victim stays alive, everything is considered to be fine. The biological body is being used as a torture chamber, so those who attack you are not interested in that you jump out of a window and kill yourself. A dead person is not only loosely speaking permanently unconscious, But such an individual only consists of very airy energies. Such energies are more difficult to manipulate and control. It's like chasing a cloud in the sky. It's not impossible. But it is more annoying and requires more work. So, in most cases, there are exceptions, you could get away from these offenders by committing suicide. But let's take a look at a couple of more uplifting and lively options. The worst thing that you could do to yourself is to give your hard-earned money away, if you are under attack. As you know, some religions are flirting with a concept like karma, which instills in the victims the idea that they better their overall position in life, if they for example give away money. But this is a crisp and clear untruth. Here is how it works in real life: if you give away your house to your favorite guru, then you have lost your house. Plain and simple. If you throw money into a roaring river, then the money is gone. Nothing left to say. Religious leaders are trying to weaken you financially because it makes it easier to break down your personality and your entire energy system. It is for the same reason that some religious leaders are basing a lot of their work upon donations from their followers. Enlightened masters are literally the richest individuals in the whole universe, and human beings are literally among the most impoverished in the universe. So, here we have the ultra-rich stealing from the ultra-underprivileged in order to become even richer. It sounds ridiculous. But it is true. If you manage to become sufficiently rich from a monetary standpoint, many problems that poor people suffer from will obviously be gone. But it will typically also lift you out of the attack zone. Jesus allegedly once said that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich person to enter heaven. As indicated earlier, enlightened masters as well as clairvoyants have comfort zones just like you and me, and their laziness and overall superiority make them gravitate toward attacking the psychologically most defenseless, like the perpetually poor, the chronically ill and the hopelessly handicapped. This is obviously why Jesus Christ was interested in them. Just like Buddha and Muhammad, he never believed in peace and love for a second. It is obvious that in today's reality there is enough wealth around for a relatively large number of people to live a fairly comfortable life. Had everybody in our solar system been relatively well off, we would probably never again see any major military conflicts. The main reason is the what's in it for me principle mentioned earlier. But the world is still horrendously overpopulated, and ideally this problem ought to go away as quickly as possible, but so far, the world leaders haven't been able to cure the patient, so to speak. It seems straightforward to suggest large-scale assisted suicide as an important step, but few politicians are brave enough to talk about it. If you have a talent for this type of work, you could turn it into a career path that would benefit everybody, except the clairvoyants and the masters, of course. If you have a special talent, money has a tendency to flow your way. If you are only moderately talented, then your only option is to work hard for your success, eventually for years. And avoid being irrational by trying to outsmart online casinos. Or putting all your money into a Forex robot that promises 20% monthly returns when the best investors anywhere are having a very hard time averaging 20% per year. It is also important to understand that becoming famous is generally speaking dangerous to your personal integrity. People at street level tend to think that fame will make you feel richer, but fame is actually something that might destroy you very quickly. Contrary to popular belief, it is not happiness that kills celebrities. It is the opposite. But working hard to improve your living conditions is not the only option. As your average energy level goes up due to the manipulation that you are being exposed to, your creative and mental abilities tend to improve too. Any enlightened master or clairvoyant would try to intimidate you away from attempting to become financially independent. But all you have to do is to promise yourself to stick to that course. And eventually, in the end, maybe after having been accompanied for years by emotional pain, physical diseases and so forth, you will be able to break free. Of course, the bigger picture is that enlightened masters don't even care if life in a few solar systems becomes extinct due to nuclear wars or whatever might be the cause. They will just eventually return some million years later and repair the damage, and then life will start all over again. So, if a tiny little person somewhere manages to leave the train of pain by becoming financially independent, then it is almost just being seen as a small nuance in an endless universe. Although this might unfortunately render you irreversibly famous, another career path could be to try to go after the wrongdoers with international class action lawsuits and military action. They generally don't like that at all. Humanity can truly threaten the masters away from the solar system by making use of the fact that the universe is their home, and it almost doesn't make any difference to them if they lose a tiny corner of it. That's how lazy they are. Masters and clairvoyants would run backwards with all their Christmas gear if you decided to use your newly acquired super intelligence to go after them. You could easily order ordinary companies to manufacture parts that could be used in weapons that potentially could destroy the souls, i.e. the finer energies of some of the wrongdoers, or at least expose them to serious pain. Spiritual masters in particular couldn't care less about dying the traditional way, because it is just a biological body that stops functioning. Masters just see the body as a funny Halloween costume that they wear in order to cheat humanity and other microscopic life forms. But it's a different story if someone managed to manufacture a weapon that could literally hit them where it truly hurts. No, human beings cannot kill an enlightened master, but as said, we could decide to kick them out of the solar system. Yes, enlightened masters and clairvoyants constitute the biggest criminal organization in the universe. And they also happen to constitute the biggest military force in the universe. But spiritual masters in particular are so much in love with their sleepy life on easy street that they often prefer to walk quietly away from any major conflict that is looming on the horizon. Just for clarification, here are a few more details. Masters' very mastery of energy at the atomic level is in and of itself a terrifying weapon. In fact, it is the ultimate weapon. The God community, which obviously consists of the largest beings in the universe, could easily kill off all enlightened masters underneath them. It just never happens, as it would be counterproductive. Over time, the amount of enlightened masters always goes up. It's a never-ending process. Here is another detail: how can any ordinary good person possibly be transformed into a clairvoyant or a spiritual master, if they truly are such monsters? Well, that has to do with the before-mentioned principle that novelist and psychic Thomas Gerner Larsen calls "what's in it for me?" Concentration camps built by enlightened masters represent the worst of all possible worlds. The reality that the enlightened masters live in represents the best of all possible worlds. When you develop clairvoyant abilities, this becomes an undeniable truth. So, any clairvoyant has to decide whether it would be tempting or not to wholeheartedly and passionately join and support the best of all worlds in the universe. Theoretically, such a person could also refuse to become evil and commit spiritual suicide, for example, but it's a question whether anyone has ever done that. To commit spiritual suicide means to destroy the core elements of your own energy system, which obviously has nothing to do with jumping out of a window and landing on top of what used to be your favorite hot dog stand down there.